Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to take a look at Jupiter turning direct in the sign of Gemini. I'm going to remind you of the whole sign house placement in your birth chart by whole sign that Jupiter is traveling through right now, remind you of the topics being activated as Jupiter turns direct, and remind you of the timeline that Jupiter has been on since turning retrograde back in October. So we'll kind of refresh on the topics, refresh on the timeline. I'm going to do that very briefly. And then I'm going to talk about 5 symptoms of growth that we can track along the lines of Jupiter's movements. These are things that I have noticed over the years in the lives of students, clients, people who comment and share stories through our Grabbed series, and in my own life, in the life of people around me, in terms of the symptoms that we notice when people are really growing spiritually, growing intellectually, deepening inwardly. And Jupiter is a planet whose transits are often associated with the development of wisdom. Jupiter, one of Jupiter's natural significations is wisdom. So we're going to focus on that particular angle today and see what we can't track and give us some good reminders of what growth looks and feels like, because it's easy to, keep track of all the facts and which areas of life and all of that. But sometimes we have to remind ourselves of the symptoms of growth itself. Like, what does growth actually look and feel like? So we're going to speculate or talk about that today and see what we come up with. All right. Well, before we get into it, as always, remember to like and subscribe. We have some subscriber goals this year. Honestly, whatever. I really don't care about them that much. That's the truth. But I do feel like I want to encourage people who are out there listening regularly who have not yet subscribed to do so, because it really does help our channel and our community grow. So if that's you, help us grow the channel this year. We really appreciate it. We're seeing if we can get to 80,000 subscribers by the spring equinox. We're about halfway there. So we'll see what we can do. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. When you are over there, the event coming up on February 20th is the one I want to share with you really briefly today. Go to events, click on live talks. I'm giving a talk on Venus retrogrades called Venus Through the Fire on February 20th, Unlocking the Mysteries and Magic of Venus retrogrades. That is from 7 to 9 p.m. on the 20th. If you cannot attend live, of course, you get the recording when you sign up. So, and then some other good webinars coming up in March and April that you can check out there as well. All right. On that note, let us take a look at Jupiter turning direct. Jupiter has already turned direct this week, just recently. Jupiter turned direct on February 4th. We are here Thursday, February 6th. So Jupiter's just starting to move forward. It changes directions, but starts moving by minutes, just inching forward at first. So it's interesting today that the moon is in Gemini as we're looking at this Jupiter direct. Feels like a good day to think and talk about Jupiter's change of direction. Now, this Jupiter direct always occurs right after the sun makes the trine to Jupiter. When the sun is in near trine or whole sign trine, close to degree-based trine with Jupiter, it will always change directions to forward motion or retrograde motion after the synodic conjunction with the sun. The first trine brings the retrograde. The second trine then brings the direct motion. So we are in the closing phase of a Jupiter cycle with the sun from this moment on, where we really do start to integrate and receive some deeper wisdom that Jupiter has brought us in the past year through the sign of Gemini in particular. So between now, if we bring this forward just a little bit, we're going to see that the conjunction with Jupiter occurs in late June. So between now and late June, we are in something like the last quarter moon phase, you could say, of the Jupiter cycle. And that has been initiated this week. That last phase is where the harvesting of wisdom from the Jupiter's synodic cycle takes place. So if we go back just a little bit, we can see that the beginning of Jupiter's synodic cycle, let me go forward here just a little bit. Here it is. The beginning of that cycle took place the very tail end of Taurus last year. This is like May 18th. So from May 18th all the way through late June of this year, we've had a full synodic cycle of Jupiter. Jupiter takes about a year to go through a sign. So the synodic cycle closely matches the sign, the amount of time that Jupiter spends in each sign. So when we are coming into the space that we are in right now, what we're doing is we're moving into this last quarter phase of Jupiter's cycle. And again, that usually means that we are starting to collect and gather the harvest, so to speak, of the Jupiter cycle. That's a lot of wisdom that's available for us right now. And we do something with that, right? Hopefully we grow, we learn, we put into action things that we've learned. Now, if you go back to the retrograde itself, you can track this back to October. It was around October 10th that Jupiter stationed and turned retrograde in the sign of Gemini. And so this here was sort of like the halfway or the first quarter moment of our cycle. And you can actually track out then the opposition between the Sun and Jupiter. So if we keep moving forward, that opposition between the Sun and Jupiter occurred while the Sun was in the sign of Sagittarius. And we saw that coincide with that interesting Mercury-Jupiter opposition where there was mutual reception by detriment. They exchanged signs. So that opposition happened around December 7th. That's like the full moon of the cycle. And then we keep going from there. And now we're in this important phase where the trine occurs between the two planets as the Sun enters Aquarius, and now Jupiter turns direct. So it's sort of a little explanation of the full synodic cycle. And different features of that we can track. You can track all the way the cycle from late, whatever it was, late spring last year, all the way through late June this year. You can track from October up until now with the retrograde to direct motion. But a lot of people like to track these longer cycles, especially on my channel where I spend a lot of time talking about them and give you some deeper journaling tips for working with these. What I am focused on this week is talking about, just briefly, I want to touch on the whole sign house of Jupiter and remind you of the topics. These aren't like full-blown horoscopes. They're more just like reminders of house topics. Let's call it that. So I'm going to remind you of the house topics, and then we are going to talk about 5 symptoms of growth that we can track along the lines of Jupiter transits. Let's start with Aries. Your 3rd house activated by Jupiter this year, and from October 10th up until now, a process of revision or reflection has been taking place for all of us. For the folks out there who identify with Aries horoscopes, we're looking at the house of communication and intellect, a place that involves us in the local environment or local sphere or culture. It's also a place where we try to express our unique will and mind to other people through how we express ourselves and how we show or share our intellect, our mind, and our thoughts. And so this is also a place of siblings and people who are sort of like peers that are like brothers and sisters, also a house that was associated with kin. And so any kinds of networks of families and peers, local environment, it's kind of the village. It's the house of like your local village. So there's been a lot of things happening there in this realm, also a place of learning. So I wonder, what has been shifting on the level of mind, speech, communication for those with the Aries horoscope. If we go forward, just sign by sign, we're going to see for Tauruses, this has been happening around things like money, resources, even things like food and diet, anything that you have, own, or possess, significant changes around things like your finances. And also who or what you rely on as people who advise you or counsel you. That was a interesting designation the 2nd house had, as people we rely on as trusted resources, and a lot of growth along those lines. For Geminis, it's in the 1st house of identity itself. So body, identity, character development, the starting of new things or the initiation of new things. For Cancer, we're looking at the 12th house, which is a place of unconscious material with respect to interests, fascinations, teachers, religion, and what kinds of unconscious material have you been looking at. This is also a place where the intersection between faith and doubt may occur with Jupiter and Gemini in this house for Cancers, as well as looking at things like education and religion and the unconscious dimensions of our relationship with those topics. So some interesting sort of subconscious material. Also, considering different points of view, opening your mind to different points of view. This is something Cancers may be working with right now, and developing that somewhat of the rational or intellectual capacity in contrast to the emotional identity that Cancers are um, so much a part of Cancers. So we go on to Leo. We see this as taking place in the house of friends, groups, colleagues, people who are allies, social networks. We see a lot of shifting from October until now in that house. What is changing? What directions are unfolding in that area? So for Virgos, the Jupiter in Gemini will be in the 10th house. That is a place of career. That is the place for Virgos where your vocation or interests or sense of calling professionally or the workplace environment is being impacted by Jupiter. If we go on to Libras, we are looking at the 9th house, place of higher education, gurus, teachers, travel abroad, philosophy, religion. Some interesting developments taking place in that in that house of the higher mind for Libras. For Scorpios, we're looking at the 8th house, that place of soul contracts with other souls, what we give and take in the nature of those soul contracts with other people, what comes to us through inheritance or death, relation to the topic of fear, anxiety, death. All of those topics the 8th house covers. Of course, this is the house where we're also looking at the best and most meaningful exchanges that we have with other people, and also those exchanges that we have with other people that are advantageous with Jupiter in that house, but also may come at some kind of cost. So what kinds of exchanges karmically are worth it or not is a topic of Jupiter's concern in that house. For Sagittarians, it's the 7th house, the place of love and relationships, intimacy, sexuality, the interpersonal dynamics of life. And what kinds of Jupiterian figures are you in relationship with? How are those relationships evolving or unfolding? We can also look at Capricorn with Jupiter being in the 6th house. We wonder about things like work, service, sacrifice, also things like sickness or the labor and hard work that we have to do on behalf of things we care about or value. How are beliefs and ideals overlapping with the kinds of work or sacrifices that you're making? Also, what are the conflicts intellectually, ideologically, religiously, philosophically that you're having? And how are you healing or solving or resolving different kinds of tensions or conflicts? Jupiter in the 6th can be very good at that. Aquarius, we place into the 5th house. Jupiter goes into the 5th, place of creativity, creative satisfaction, children, pregnancy, romance. This is a house that connects us with other people through joy and creativity and love. And so we think about this place with Jupiter there in terms of how our mind is growing or how we are expanding and growing in our relationships creatively. Along what creative lines are we evolving? Might be a question for Aquarians right now. What conversations are forcing us to grow or move into more of our creative capacities? Also, in what ways are we opening ourselves up to different or new ideas or people or influences creatively? All kind of interesting Jupiter in the 5th house topics, in addition to the topics of like children and pregnancy. For Pisces, it's in the 4th house, home and family. So we look at the place of where you live, your living environment, home, family, parental relationships, karma around the ancestral history of your life or their ancestral past. So thinking about it around the place of your roots, private or inner sphere of life, and the home or living environment. And then again, just broadly speaking, family karma. So just some reminders of where Jupiter has been, where the work of Jupiter has been taking place. The benefit of this is to track, as Jupiter is turning direct, what kinds of shifts or changes are synthesizing or coming together right now. Jupiter's shift into direct motion, retrograde since October 10th, in this area of your life can reflect an ongoing process of evolution. Evolution means unfolding, but it usually, for those of us who believe in such a thing as spiritual evolution, that evolution means the unfolding of the illumination process from within. The idea being, again, not everyone has to believe this to get something out of this channel, but the idea being that each of us are growing in our conscious capacity And that capacity can be measured by things like our ability to love, our ability to forgive, our ability to be to emanate peaceful vibrations, things like that, that many different religious and spiritual traditions have talked about as the symptoms of ongoing spiritual evolution. So I want to talk today briefly about things that we can track that they're not astrological in the sense that we're not just tracking themes and topics and dates within our biological narrative, but we're also tracking spiritual growth and evolution. How do we know that we're growing spiritually is a really good question. And I certainly am just someone, someone, with ideas. And what these come from is I'm not attempting to define spiritual growth or something like that. These are just symptoms of growth that I have noticed in myself, in others, in what wisdom traditions that I've studied have said, and in like students, clients. What do human beings generally start to exude when there is spiritual growth taking place, when that illumination from within is happening, which is something that is just as important to track along any of these transit lines as the actual topics and themes. So I hope that this will serve us right now, because it's a good moment with Jupiter turning direct to reflect and say, I really have learned a lot, and then ask ourselves these questions. And if you can say yes to even one of them, I think that it's a really encouraging sign that we've been doing some growth, and that is beautiful. So let's look at number one on my list here. The symptom of growth that I've noticed in myself over the years, and I've noticed in so many people that I've worked with through astrology, is that when you learn something, often it means that you're also learning that you didn't know something, or you thought you knew something, but you didn't, or maybe a behavior, an attitude, a perception, maybe it wasn't quite the right one. I know that's a subjective, weird thing to say, but it's like you realize I was in error. I was in ignorance. I didn't see something clearly, or I wasn't acting in the way that I now know that I can or I should. And when that shift happens, rather than focusing on error, and rather than getting stuck in the guilt or the shame of having been wrong or having not been in alignment or whatever the case may be, we are more excited about the new thing we've learned and the opportunity that we have to step into that new thing that we've learned. I've noticed this is a big thing in the lives of my kids, right? Like, we're learning something. And just the other day, let me give you a little simple example. So my daughter Summer is 6, and she had this really hard time saying she was sorry, because to say you're sorry means you were wrong. And she would always spend so much time defending what she did, because most of the time when she did something that we wanted to, kind of correct or whatever, she didn't mean to do anything wrong, right? It was like, she didn't mean to hurt her sister's feelings, or she didn't mean to knock the glass over, or like whatever the case may be. And so when we, even no matter how gently we would try to, give some instruction or some course correction or whatever, she would be like, no, I'm not wrong. I'm not bad. I'm not a bad, right? And it was like, yeah, okay, this is it. When all of us are like that, we're still like that. All of us have, when there's an opportunity to learn something, one of the first things that comes up is we go, I'm a good person. I didn't mean to do anything wrong. And of course. And so one of the things we say to Summer all the time, and say, like, sweetie, it's okay to mess up. It is totally okay. How do we learn unless we mess up, And just recently she started saying she was sorry, like totally unprompted. Like, we didn't say, you really should say you're sorry to your sister, blah, blah, blah. She just started saying she was sorry. And both my wife and I noticed it. And on separate occasions, both of us said, Summer, I'm really proud of you. It's not hard to say sorry. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you made a little mistake. And saying sorry is like totally okay. Doesn't mean anything bad about you. Right? So when we learn spiritually, though, we might be in our 40s or 30s, whatever, or late, we might be in our Saturn return or something, and there's some adjustment. We go from a place of darkened consciousness to lighter understanding about something. A symptom that we're growing is that we're more excited about putting into practice the new thing we've learned than we are about protecting ourselves from having been wrong. And that is, to me, that is one of the most exciting things. Whenever that happens to me, it's like I'm so much more excited now that I understand something than I was about being wrong. There's some way in which we have to choose to receive grace in moments like that and forgiveness. And we get to be more excited. I always tell students in astrology, like when you're studying astrology, you have to be more excited about the process of learning and your curiosity to grow as an astrologer than you are frustrated by the things you don't get or have a hard time understanding. If your enthusiasm and excitement for the topic outweighs the frustration with the difficulties of the learning process, you'll get there. It'll look different. It'll feel different. It'll take a different amount of time for everybody. You'll get there. Because when we prioritize the joy of learning, and we sort of live to be corrected because we're not threatened by it, and we want to learn and we want to grow. We want to grow our capacity for illumination within, and that's an exciting prospect, not one that threatens us. Wow, that's growth, you know? And I also say that like there are times where we really do have to work to overcome shame. And there's sometimes we spend way too much time on getting things right, you know? So there's that too. But isn't it just true that when you learn something that's truly exciting, that you've really understood something, that excitement carries you past? You feel so thankful to be in receipt of that kind of understanding that it's more powerful than any guilt or shame you might feel. Summer was so proud of herself when she was starting to say sorry. And I was so proud of her, you know, and I told her that. And that's how we learn and grow, because just like a parent that says, good job, you're embracing grace and you're doing things that stretch your capacity and you're more excited about growth than you are about, you know, having not been in a place where you knew, you know, feeling like you were wrong or something. You know, that the universe is always just like, you know, just like I have to be that way for my daughter. The universe is always like that for us. It's always like, it's okay. It's okay that you didn't know, that you didn't get something right. And this attitude of being excited to learn and grow, being more excited about the growth than the shame, that's it. That's the symptom of growth. Look for that right now, right? That's happening when Jupiter turns direct. Number 2, our learning has softened our hearts and made us more compassionate, careful, and considerate. This is, to me, I can only speak for myself, but a symptom of my own growth. And again, what I've noticed in the growth of people around me, you know, my partner, my wife, Ashley, my kids, my family, friends, students, it's universal. When you learn and grow through difficulties and you get things wrong or you understand things you didn't before, you get new information comes to light and now you know more than you did, whatever the case may be, that learning, because we have to go through a process of acceptance. I once was lost and now I'm found, you know? And you also know this is going to happen again. If I live, I have a friend of mine who said this, and he goes, you know, if I look at who I was 5 years ago, I'm always like, yeah, what an asshole, you know, what a dick. I'm just sorry. What a cocky little person I was, you know. But by that logic, we know that that's where we are right now too. In 5 years, we'll be saying the same thing about where we were right now. Can we be delighting in that and find it? Can that just fill us with this humility in the moment? You know, I'm doing the best I can. I know that I'm going to keep learning and growing. I know this process doesn't stop. It's joyful and wonderful that it doesn't stop. I don't need it to stop in order to, I don't have to reach some final level and, you know, get the MMA belt of the universe for having submitted all demons or like whatever bullshit story I've got in my head, you know. And as we go along, can we just notice that as I learn and grow, my heart gets softer? Softer doesn't mean weaker. Softer can also mean stronger and more effective at loving, at being compassionate, at being careful, at being considerate. because we know that all other beings, all without exception, are in the same exact process that we are in. And if we need to have compassion for ourselves and tolerance and peace and love and acceptance for each step of our journey, then how much more does everybody else needs the same thing? So a symptom of wisdom in process is a combination of firm but gentle, compassionate, loving, careful, thoughtful considerateness in how we speak, in how we treat other beings, regardless of if we agree with them or not, regardless of whether or not we find their views reprehensible or not, that the fundamental thing we see in each other is the light growing. And we know that all of us are in a process of illumination, which means all of us are assholes who 5 years from now will see ourselves right now as buttheads running around, So, that those are symptoms of growth. We're growing when we're softening and becoming more compassionate, careful, thoughtful, considerate, and nurturing of other beings in their process. When we just feel a little bit more like, I see you. I didn't see people the way I do now. And we'll feel that way over and over and over again. The depth of divinity in each of us is endless. And so our capacity to grow and appreciate each other and say, I didn't see you the way I do now, is also endless. That's what's so amazing about divine intimacy. Number 3, we feel more confident, although we are also humbler and less infallible. There's a weird way in which growth makes us feel stronger and more confident from within. And yet we are also humbler and less infallible, and therefore less likely to enter into big displays of ego and big displays of self-righteousness. It's just you're less likely to do it because you can feel it, you can hear it. It's not the drama you want. We're more confident, but also humbler and less infallible. It's like you develop a bit of a martial art for staying away from things that will inflate your ego. You're just more sensitive to it. I don't know, just be careful, It doesn't mean you don't have fun either, but your ability to have fun, doesn't tip over into these things that take us out of the beautiful balancing point that humility and fallibility give us. Really, it's a paradox that they give us that, but they do. We're sensitized to anger, jealousy, resentment, judgment, shame, guilt, all of those negative voices that infect our minds, that poison the well, and that have us thinking and talking about other people or even ourselves, the internal voices within, in ways that are angry, jealous, resentful, judgmental, shameful, guilty, bitter, aggressive. We become sensitized to those voices, and we have a way of gently saying, I see you and you're welcome to be here, but we're going to need to repurpose you. we're going to need to find a slightly different role for you to play. It's not that anger doesn't have a role in creation, it does, but what is the right relationship with any of these things? And we become sensitized to their voices within us, toward ourselves, toward others. Again, these are symptoms of wisdom growing. Wisdom is not about what you know, it's about how you are. And it's a connection between knowing and being that permeates the way we encounter and experience each other and ourselves, more than it is some understanding of objective reality or truth. We understand objective reality and truth to be subjectively experienced in eternity in an ongoing manner. And so wisdom is something that flows through us and allows us to live in a way that is also fluid. This is the way that Taoists talk about wisdom that I've always loved so much. It's my jam. All right. So number 5, we are increasingly careful about creating drama for ourselves or others. Like when wisdom comes into our life, we start to realize that there are killers of wisdom and that all beings are in a process of coming into this illumination from within. All beings are in that process. And so we want to act and behave in a way that is conducive to other beings finding that within themselves and within the world and within their lives. And so we become increasingly careful about getting drawn into things that take us out of a vibration of wisdom. And we are equally cautious in what we do and how we talk and so forth to not purposely try to draw other people into inner turmoil and conflict. This is one of the reasons that I personally stay away from a lot of like text-based social media, like Twitter and Facebook, where I notice that there's just so much debating and fighting and rhetoric, and I noticed that I was often I felt dragged into drama mentally, even if I didn't even type things. Just looking at it, I would feel like, ugh, like it's like a tractor reading, or I would find myself posting stuff, and even with good intentions, often, dragging other people into conflict and drama. I think that there's a way in which you live. I think about the Bhagavad Gita a lot, one of my favorite wisdom texts, and the idea that like the field of Kurukshetra in the battlefield of the Bhagavad Gita is the field of Dharma. And we're all here to participate in the world, and part of the world is very dramatic. So it's not like we need to bury our heads in the sand, run off to a cave, and try to stay neutral in a way that's like inauthentic. But one who recognizes the illusions of trying to find ourselves or something of divine or eternal value in the results of the conflicts, like that's the illusion that we're also here to overcome. And so we have to be very careful and considerate of where and how we engage in drama in our personal lives, in the intersection between our personal and collective dimensions of life. And those considerations, they grow in us over time as we cultivate and develop wisdom, and we recognize what keeps us in the vibration of living wisdom versus what really takes us out. So it'll look different for you than it does for me, than it does for the next person. Some people are meant to be deeply engaged, active on the battlefield, and can do so while remaining independent in spirit and mind and free within. And that's an incredible capacity. It's one that I certainly don't have in many arenas. I can't go into. Others I do okay, and I can maintain equanimity while talking about all sorts of subjects in astrology or whatever the case might be, or philosophy, things that I'm interested in. And that there's other topics that as soon as I get into, I know I lose myself more easily here. And we all have to develop our radar for that, right? How does that work for each of us? So anyway, those are my thoughts on the symptoms of growth. I hope that they're useful for you. You may have a different list or things to add to this list. One of these may, fit better than another. They are all just things for your consideration. I appreciate all of you. I hope you're having a good day. We will see you again tomorrow. Bye.